Sunday morning. Good morning. Welcome to Front Page Jacksonville. Hey, how has the week been for you? I know it's been brisk. I know it's been cold. It's that time of year. But what have you been up to? Especially as we are now transitioning into the holiday season. Well, before we get into the holidays, because there are a few different things we're going to scratch the surface of as it relates to the holiday season, but I'm going to hold on to that just a little bit. But before we do, have you had an opportunity to go see Denzel Jerome Washington Jenkins in Gladiator 2? Have you had an opportunity? Now, I'm not going to give any spoilers or anything like that. But my wife and I, we had an opportunity to take an impromptu date on Friday evening. We were in Clearwater, Florida. I was doing some work, and she was gracious enough to be my passenger princess. She doesn't drive when she's with me. She was my passenger princess. So once I wrapped up with work, we went to the movie theater down in Clearwater, and we had a chance to go see Gladiator 2. Go see the film. Go see the film. Now, what makes it even more entertaining, in my humble opinion, is if you've seen Gladiator 1. Now, if you have not seen Gladiator 1, take the time between now and when you purchase your ticket to see Gladiator 2 to watch Gladiator 1. Now, there's a possibility going to watch Gladiator 2, you might be able to put certain pieces together, but you gotta respect the classic that Gladiator 1 is. You gotta understand what the type of heat that Russell Crowe brought to the character Maximus to be able to fully appreciate Gladiator 2. Again, in my humble opinion. Now, is Gladiator 2 one of those films that I can put on repeat? I don't know. The jury's still out on that. Gladiator 1, I could watch it every time it comes on TV. Even if it's not on TV, I would look it up on a streaming service to watch Gladiator 1. It's just that type of film. 300 is another one of those films that I can watch on repeat. But Denzel, we all know Denzel. Denzel is Denzel. Whether it's in California as Alonzo from Training Day, or it's Denzel, and I can't remember the character's name that he plays in Gladiator 2. But, Denzel brings that same essence to whatever era, whatever time he's acting in. But he did recently announce that he is soon to retire. Denzel is about to hang it up. Excuse me, Denzel is about to hang it up. And apparently Ryan Coogler reached out to him requesting that he plays a role in Black Panther 3. So I think that role in Black Panther 3 is going to be his final farewell to thespianism. So it'll be interesting to see what the character will be that he plays in Black Panther 3. But then after that, what will Denzel do? What will Denzel do after he leaves acting? What do retired actors do? I don't know. I mean, typically those of us who work 9 to 5s, people retire and, they start gardens. They might volunteer around the community. They may pick up a part-time job just because they're bored. But what do retired actors and actresses get into? Because he's the first actor that I can recall ever saying, yeah, I'm going to retire. Retire and do what? Curious about that. But if you have not had an opportunity to see Gladiator 2, go check it out. And I'll admit, more often than not, I'm the type of person where I'd much rather wait until that film goes to streaming before I spend my money at the movie theater to go and see it. But I had to go and support. It was Denzel, Had to go support Denzel. Similarly with Black Panther 2. Had to go to the movies to see that. This is Front Page Jacksonville. I am Octavius, the $1 Million Voice Davis. If you would like to jump in on any of the topics that we discussed during the show today, I'm going to give you the number now. That way you can write it down. Write it down, lock it in on your phone. I would prefer you lock it in on your phone. It would make me feel like I'm part of your family. Lock me into your contacts. 833-758-1065. That's 833-758-1065. So I mentioned that I have a couple of holiday things that we're going to touch on today. During the 7 o'clock hour, we have a marriage and family therapist, Khalliah Bryant. She's going to be in the studio with us talking about, number one, mental health, the importance of mental health, but specifically during this time of year, mental health becomes a challenge for some. So she's going to share with us some tips for overcoming the holiday blues, but that's going to be during the second hour. Right now, what I want to talk with you about is a Thanksgiving holiday giveaway that took place just the other day. Thousands of people thousands of people lined up to get free Thanksgiving supplies. Farm Share, which is the name of the organization, hosted a free turkey giveaway. The event also provided families with non-perishable goods, disaster relief kits, and even toys for the holidays. Khalliah Justice helped organize the event for Farm Share, with nearly 2,000 meals being provided to those in need. With the event running while supplies lasted, many families showed up hours before the event started. Some even got there the night prior. Kudos to Farm Share. Kudos to Khalliah Justice for providing those supplies for families. During this time of year, we often see, I'm going to say the best of humanity on display. Now, I know that there are organizations that do things throughout the year from a philanthropic standpoint, from a goodwill standpoint. But to me, it just seems like this time of year really gets people into the spirit of giving to others in particular who may be less fortunate. The news article said that there were a sea of cars lined up for this particular giveaway. This event took place at the FSCJ downtown campus. More than 2,000 meals were provided. Here's the thing that gets me. Again, staying in the spirit of giving to others and being available to provide to others who may be less fortunate. The fact that people were showing up the night before the event, that is a clear indication of what's happening right now in our country from an economic standpoint, from a cost of living standpoint. And I have another story coming up in just a moment surrounding cost of living. Times are tough out here in these streets. It's tough out here. So I'm thankful for organizations like Farm Share who, don't consider it robbery to spend their time raising the funds necessary to secure these foods, to work to develop the relationships necessary to be able to provide this food. I saw another story where there was another organization here in Jacksonville, as a matter of fact. They raised, I think, close to 2,000 jars of peanut butter, and they'll be able to provide that peanut butter. And let me clarify. I ain't talking about peanut butter, half-eaten jars of peanut butter when somebody was making peanut butter jelly sandwiches. Now the jar of peanut butter got jelly all in the peanut butter. You You open up the jar of peanut butter, it's all oily and ran through. No. I'm not talking about that. They weren't collecting your old jars of peanut butter. They were collecting brand new jars, unopened jars of peanut butter, which they'll be providing to food pantries as well, to do similarly like Khalliah Justice and FarmShare has done with providing those items to families in need. The past 4 or 5 years economically in this country, it has been a tough pill for a lot of people to swallow. Cost of living is rising astronomically. And I'll go ahead and use that as a segue into my next story. Because the cost of living has become so ridiculously high that even what some at one time thought was affordable housing, it's not even affordable anymore. A study finds that affordable housing meant for Jacksonville's workforce is not affordable. An analyst found that if it's more than one person who lives in a household, a Jacksonville teacher or firefighter probably cannot afford that housing. A new study from the Florida Policy Institute, which is a nonprofit organization, finds that most housing meant for Jacksonville's workforce is not affordable for many households. The Florida legislature allocated millions for affordable housing. The analyst compared workforce housing prices to the salaries of people like educators and firefighters. She found that if it's more than 1 to 2 people living in that home, they probably can't afford the home. They had an opportunity to speak with the Jacksonville mother, Regina G. She said affordable housing is supposed to be affordable, but it's not. I agree with you, Ms. G. Do you know what the average rental cost is here in Jacksonville? We're just talking about apartments. We haven't even teetered into home ownership. The average rent in Jacksonville, $1,296. That's the average rent in 2024. And that nearly $1,300 worth of rent is only for a 1-bedroom apartment. Average square footage of 747 square feet. A 2-bedroom is $1,529. Again, these are averages. The average rent for an apartment in Jacksonville, Duval, Florida, $1,885. Who is setting? And again, I'm ignorant. I don't know. I don't know anything about real estate. I don't know anything about market shares or any of that kind of stuff. I don't know nothing about none of that. All I know is the rent is too high. I do know that much. When we talk about affordable housing, again, going back to Miss Regina G's statement, affordable housing is unaffordable. Can't nobody afford this. Grocery prices are through the roof. Gas prices are somewhat beginning to decrease. But here's the problem. The salaries of the working class are not increasing. Salaries aren't going up. I know teachers. I know firefighters. And $1,200 a month, $1,600 a month in rent, they can't afford that. So who's determining this affordable housing? Well, FloridaHousing.org, flhousing.org. This is the website that kind of gives you like a playbook of what affordable housing should look like here in the state of Florida. And there's quite a bit of information here, so I'm just going to kind of cherry pick bits and pieces. And I like the fact that they have a table of contents here on the opening website once you scroll down, so it makes it much easier to kind of determine where you want to be. But chapter 1, they say, what is affordable housing? And they got nice little pictures, and it's bright and cheerful and all of that great and grand stuff. What is affordable housing? Affordable housing is safe and decent housing. It differs from market rate housing in 2 ways. Number 1, the income of the family living in the housing. And number 2, the financing of the housing. Now, just based on this seems to be more geared towards homes, home ownership, less with apartments. But truth be told, whether you're trying to secure an apartment or get a home, I mean, pick your poison, because both of them are ridiculously high. My wife and I bought our home in 2021, and we've had conversations. I don't know. I think I might be willing to sell this bad boy and go back to an apartment. Because at least with an apartment, you don't have to worry about property taxes. At least with an apartment, there's a maintenance, well, there should be a maintenance team, because that's a whole nother conversation. We're not going to talk about the shoddy work that sometimes comes along with the maintenance crews at some of these apartments. That's if they even have a maintenance team. You put in a work order, you still waiting 6 months down the road for your work order to be filled. But that's neither here nor there. At least with apartments, you don't have to worry about the expenses that comes along with maintaining a yard and things of that nature. See, all those expenses accrue. Let me use some financial terms. Those expenses accrue with home ownership. Because realtors will tell you, oh, well, everybody should own a home. Well, of course you're going to say that. You get paid every time somebody buy a home. You get paid a commission off that. And so what they'll do is, the way they'll present it to you, and again, if you'd like to jump in on the conversation, if you're a homeowner or previous homeowner, whatever the case may be, 833-758-1065 is the number to call, 833-758-1065. I'm going to stand on my soapbox for a moment, because I'm not one who is going to beat the drum of everybody should own a home. I don't believe that, because everybody can't afford a home. Everybody can't afford an apartment right now. So what they'll do is like these financing institutions. Oh, well, your mortgage is only going to be, $1,300. You're like, oh, that's great. $1,300 for this 30-year loan? Wow. I was paying $1,600 a month with an apartment. This is going to be fantastic. I'll be able to save so much money. But what they don't tell you is, oh, and by the way, every year your property tax is going to be about $8,000. And oh, there are HOA fees. And you want to make sure that you also maintain your lawn. And if anything breaks, and of course everybody knows this, if anything breaks in the home, you're 100% responsible for that. By the time it all shakes out on a monthly basis, oh, and then there's also PMI, like basically insurance, homeowners insurance that you have to carry as well. There are all these other fees and expenses that happy-go-lucky realtor may not necessarily tell you about on the front end when they tell you, well, everybody should own a home. Well, they told you that your mortgage was going to be about $1,300 a month, which is true in principle. But when you tag all those other fees on it, now you're paying about $2,600 a month. And here it is. When you were in an apartment, you was kicking out $1,600 a month for that apartment. So I'm not one who believes that everybody should own a home. I don't. Because here's the other thing I hear people say. Well, home ownership, well, it's a great investment. Okay. How many people do you know who have actually paid off their home? a buddy of mine and I were having this conversation about a year ago. And I told him, I said, I don't know, man. I think to a certain degree, home ownership is a scam. I said, because let's keep it real. How many people do you know who have actually paid off their home? I don't know very many. I do know a lot of people who have had their homes foreclosed on. I do know a lot of people who have refinanced their home and ultimately have had to foreclose on it. It just seems like a scam. And again, it could be because of my ignorance. I don't know how the shell game of real estate works. Don't necessarily know that I care to know. But I do know that I would appreciate affordable housing. I'm sure you would appreciate affordable housing. The average rent for an apartment in Jacksonville is nearly $1,300. I remember my very first apartment, I was paying $509 a month for rent. That was for a one-bedroom. I don't even think they probably changed the name by now. You know how apartment complexes go through different ownership. It was called Bentley Green Apartments over on Bay Meadows Road. And then I messed around and got a roommate, my homeboy MJ. He moved in with me. All right. And I mean, both of us were bachelors. So we didn't have any problem with slumming it. I had the bedroom. He was in the living room. He had a futon. I had a mattress on the floor. We had a TV that sat on a milk crate. Was no entertainment centers. There was none of that. But when it was time for rent, we split that 508, 509, whatever it was, right down the middle. And it was glorious. We ate out whenever we wanted because we had extra money. We had money for gas. It was a beautiful thing. Fast forward 2024, you're going to need about 6 roommates to make this thing work. Hey, there's a lot more coming up down the road. More topics that we want to discuss of things that are happening here in the city of Jacksonville. If you'd like to jump in, 833-758-1065 is the number to call. This is Front Page Jacksonville. I'll see you in a moment.
Now back to the show that informs you and discusses the issues. Front Page Jacksonville on Hot 106.5.
Before the break, I was talking about the affordable housing here in Jacksonville, and it got me reminiscing. Thinking back to my very first apartment, $508 a month. What would you do with $508 for rent? Making the same amount of money you're making right now.
I don't know jet ski.
My producer Jack said he'd get a jet ski. Right? $508 a month. Now, in the art of full transparency, things weren't always rosy for me back then when I was paying that $508 a month. Because when I moved into the apartment, it was just myself. It was my senior year of college. As a matter of fact, I was getting ready to graduate college. I was director of a radio station here in town. I think I was probably kicking down maybe $25,000 a month. All right. I think that's what I was bringing home. And so I graduated. When I graduated, went on to seminary school, Bible college. And there was no financial aid for theological seminary. Had to pay that out of pocket. So I was paying my tuition out of pocket on top of, my car note, my rent, all of that good stuff. So the 508, as great as it was back then, things was a little rough. There was a lot of ramen noodles in the cabinet. That's how survival was done for me. I was single, no kids. I could afford to rough it, Jack. And thankfully for me, my cousin Anaya was working for Kellogg at the time. And the heavens must have heard the grumbles of my stomach. Because my cousin contacted me and said, hey, I have all this, like Pop-Tarts and cereal and all this stuff. Do you know some people? I was like, yeah, I know some people. I was people. I went and got that stuff from my cousin, and I lived off that stuff for weeks. And then the heavens heard another cry. This time I think it was actually me crying from hunger. My homeboy MJ called. He said, hey, man, What do you think about us roommating? Yes. Let's do it. We split that rent down the middle. I remember when he first moved in, he was going through the refrigerator and the cabinet. He said, man, what you eating on here? Ain't nothing to eat. Hey, bro, a wing and a prayer. That's what I'm living off of. He went and stocked the refrigerator with food. It was great. And then we started splitting that $508 a month for rent down the middle. Made life so much easier. So, again, attempting to make ends meet in this economy, we may have to go back to the roommate model, people. And I'm not talking about a roommate. I'm talking roommates. I'm talking about Three's Company style, for those of you who may remember that 70s show. There were 3 roommates in that apartment I think that was probably San Francisco, where they were trying to make ends meet. Jack Tripper and his 2 roommates. We may have to triple up, quadruple up on the roommates because this affordable housing is not so affordable. You're listening to Front Page Jacksonville. If you'd like to jump in on the call, on the conversation, 833-758-1065 is the number to call. Recently, FEMA approved over $1 billion for homeowners and renters affected by the 2024 hurricanes. I think hurricane season is officially over. I think this weekend culminated hurricane season. I got to take a look at one of the meteorologist information out there. Some meteorological. Is it meteorological? Meteorological does not sound like a word. That definitely sounds like something I made up. Meteorological. I'm positive that's not a word. I'm going to ask Siri. Jack, you don't look too certain either. I'm positive meteorological is not a word. That sounds like a very illogical word. Either case, I need to find out when hurricane season officially culminates because I think it's over. I think we've made it through the storms.
It's very real.
Meteorological?
Relating to the branch of science concerned with the processes and the phenomena of the atmosphere, especially as a means of forecasting weather.
Okay, well, meteorological is a word. All right, I thought I was pronouncing it wrong.
Selling yourself short.
All right, there we go. Hey, there you go. See, Jack, come on, Mike. I don't think they heard the definition. So Jack just bailed me out there to make sure that I wasn't making up words. Make sure you're fully programmed.
Oh yeah, here we are. So Duval, we've got our vocab word of the day on Front Page Jacks. It's meteorological. Relating to the branch of science concerned with the processes and phenomena of the atmosphere, especially as a means of forecasting the weather. Yeah. So meteorological.
Let me hear you pronounce it.
Let me do this truly. Meteorological.
Huh.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, well, like you said, I was being too hard on myself.
You knew it to be true in your heart. I'll tell you this. Come on.
Well, thank you, Jack.
Yes, sir.
I appreciate that. So FEMA has approved over $1 billion of disaster assistance for homeowners and renters affected by hurricanes Milton, Helene, and Debbie. Here's how that billion breaks down. $449.2 million for Hurricane Milton, $516.6 million for Hurricane Helene, and $49.8 million for Hurricane Debbie. These funds are part of FEMA's Individual Assistance Program, which provides aid to those whose homes were damaged or destroyed. Homeowners or renters can apply to receive money for basic home repairs, personal property losses, and other disaster-related expenses that are uninsured or underinsured. Applications can be submitted online at disasterassistance.gov or through the FEMA app. For those who prefer to apply by phone, the FEMA hotline is available at 800-621-3362. That number again is 800-621-3362. Now, good people, here's what I would like to caution you against. You do know that the PPP scandal of 2020 has gotten a lot of people in trouble. And there's actually a warrant list where the government is going after these people who submitted these fraudulent PPP loan claims. And not just claims, but money that they actually received. Don't treat these FEMA dollars like those PPP loans. Please don't. They are going to find out. If you submit a FEMA claim due to the hurricanes that came through, please let it be legit. I would hate to see a social media video of you being hauled off in cuffs because you submitted a false FEMA hurricane relief claim. Come on now. We was just talking about how bad the economy is and how expensive rent is. I get it, but that's not the way. Please don't submit fraudulent FEMA claims. You don't want to go out like that. And I've seen people on social media who apparently have discovered that their names are on this PPP loan warrant list. And I don't know of anyone personally who submitted any fraudulent PPP loan requests. But I do remember back during that time, sitting in the barbershop, and they having conversations. Oh man, hey, man, you submit that PPP loan? Yeah, you got a business, right? You got an LLC, right? I was like, yeah, I got a business. Oh man, you need to go ahead and get that money, man. Just that and the third. And I did go online. I was curious how much I'd be eligible for. So I filled out the little questionnaire and everything else. But then when they showed me what I was eligible for, I was like, nah, it's not worth it. It ain't worth it. But then I've heard of other people where they got racks upon racks. Racks, that's, the slang for grand, thousands. They got a couple of racks. I just hope that their businesses are legit and that they're able to pay those loans back. Otherwise, it's going to be bars upon bars. Hey, this is Front Page Jacksonville. We are going to have a guest joining us in the second hour. During the holiday season, many people like to get together with their family. They like to travel. Some choose to not do any of that due to loved ones transitioning on or relationships not being what they used to be. And so sometimes they go through the holiday season in isolation. And with that comes emotions that could impact their overall mental health. So in the second hour, my guest, Khalliah Bryant, she is a licensed marriage and family therapist. She's going to be here in the studio with me, and we're going to peel those layers back of that onion one bit at a time to be able to share some information with you that can help you navigate through this time of year. So stick around. More is on the way. This is Front Page Jacksonville.
Hot 106.5. It's time now for Front Page Jacksonville, a show that delves into the issues that affect you. We believe in transparency and providing only the facts. And now, here's Octavius Davis.
Yesterday, Saturday, November 23rd, was National Adoption Day. Have you ever heard of National Adoption Day? Well, it's a pretty big to-do. Even though National Adoption Day is recognized as one specific day in November, within child welfare, the month of November is recognized as National Adoption Month. Well, National Adoption Day is a collective grassroots effort to raise awareness of the more than 1,008 children waiting to be adopted from foster care in the United States. A coalition of national partners, the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption, Dave Thomas, founder of Wendy's, Congressional Coalition on Adoption Institute, Alliance for Children's Rights, and Children's Action Network launched National Adoption Day in 1999. During this annual event, courts and organizations in more than 400 communities across the country have opened their doors on or around the Saturday before Thanksgiving to finalize and celebrate adoptions from foster care. National Adoption Day has recognized more than 85,000 children moving from foster care to a permanent family. So kudos and congratulations to all of the families who were finalized as forever families this past week here in Duval. As a matter of fact, 16 children in Jacksonville were adopted into their forever family right here in the 904. Now, something that most people aren't familiar with, because I wasn't familiar with this before I began working in child welfare. Adoption days are spectacular opportunities to see how impactful love can truly be in the life of a child or children. But here's the sobering reality. On Adoption Day, whether it's a celebratory event like National Adoption Day this past week or just a regular day where an adoption is taking place, there are two polarizing emotions being experienced. On one hand, there's exuberance and excitement and overwhelming sense of joy because finally we've been able to adopt this child from the foster care system and into our home, and they're officially our child. Tears are flowing. Everyone is excited. It's great. But on the other end of that spectrum, please know and understand, for the child, there's somewhat of a mourning that's taking place. There's a funeral that's happening on the side of the child because that biological parental relationship is now officially terminated. It's gone. It's severed legally. There is no turning back. And so if you've ever had the honor of adopting, or if you're considering adopting a child out of foster care, that's an important caveat to keep in your mental space. So that once, if everyone else is celebrating and you go out for your dinner and everything else, if the child seems a little melancholy, that's not the child not being appreciative of what just took place. It's the child, especially depending upon the age of the child. Now, if it's an infant, an infant isn't going to have any recollection. But a child between 5 to 17 years old, a teenager who has a recollection of their biological parent, now give them an opportunity to kind of process through that. Because for some, there's a finality that's there of like, wow, my mom or my dad really just gave me up. They really didn't do everything that they needed to do to preserve our family. So just know there's a mixture of emotions that goes into adopting a child out of foster care. According to the National Adoption Day.org, which is the website where I read the opening information from, there are 1,008 children in the United States that are available for adoption out of the foster care system. Right here in Duval and Nassau County, we have close to 400 kids. It's about 360, 365, somewhere up in there, that are available for adoption. And that includes sibling groups. That includes teenagers. Yes, I know what they show on television, but it is rare that you get the cutesy-wootsy little newborn baby that's in foster care that's available for adoption. That's rare. Those are rare instances. More often than not, you have littles. Littles are, your 3, 4, 5, 6, 7-year-olds, teenagers, and sibling groups who are available for adoption right here in Duval. And maybe adoption isn't your thing. That's okay too. But I would encourage you to at least see how you can help out. There are ways that you can volunteer. Maybe you enjoy cooking. You may want to make a meal for a foster or an adoptive family. I am certain they would appreciate the extra care and concern, as for some are navigating parenthood for the first time. In addition to Front Page Jacksonville, I also host a podcast. A Tribe Called Family is the name of the podcast. This is where all this adoption and foster care information is coming from, because I do a podcast that focuses on families who are in the child welfare system, either foster parents, were previously adopted, so on and so forth. And so I kind of, I navigate in those circles. And I had an opportunity to interview a family. It was so funny hearing them share their story of what ultimately led to them adopting. They started out as foster parents. And the very first child that was placed in their care, I think he was, maybe a little older than 1, I believe. And for this mother and father, husband and wife, they didn't have any, children together. And so when the case manager came and brought the child to their house, they was like, oh, shoot, we don't have no diapers. We don't have no baby food. I don't even know how to change a diaper. So it was so humorous to hear them articulate the reality when that child came to their door, because they went through training and everything else and became licensed foster parents. And wow, this is going to be great. Yeah, till that baby came. That baby showed up and it got real. So there are so many different ways that you can get involved. If you do not believe that fostering and adopting is for you, you don't have to foster or adopt. You can volunteer. You can donate, whether of your monetarily or, other goods that you may have at your disposal. Or you may be able to connect some people. That's always needed. That's always helped. And if you'd like to find out more, you can go to familysupport.org to learn more information on how you can get involved with helping families that are involved in the system of care. So during this time of year, holiday season, right? Do you realize it has been 12 years since the young man, Jordan Davis, was unfortunately murdered at the Gate gas station on Southside Boulevard? 12 years. It was during, the Thanksgiving holiday. I distinctively remember it back in 2012. Jordan Davis was 17 years old when he was murdered. Now, Michael Dunn, who was the assailant, he's behind bars. Life in prison is what was handed down to him in the judge's ruling. But Jordan's parents have become phenomenal advocates for other families across the country who have lost a loved one due to unfortunate gun violence. Many of you may recall his father, Ronald Davis, worked with HBO, and they did the documentary 3.5 Minutes, 10 Bullets. I believe that released in 2015. I had an opportunity to meet with Mr. Davis during that time. Very meek gentleman, but tenacious and very dogmatic with ensuring his son's legacy is remembered, and that the story is told as a manner of honoring his son Jordan, but at the same time educating others as well. Jordan's mom, Lucy Macbeth, when Jordan was murdered, it ignited something on the inside of her that completely changed her life's trajectory. Completely changed her trajectory. When what happened to Jordan took place, Miss Macbeth had been a flight attendant with Delta Airlines for 30 years. But after that situation took place, she became the national spokesperson and faith and outreach leader for Everytown for gun safety and Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America. Then, in 2018, after the mass shooting that killed 17 people at Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, Miss Macbeth knew she had to do something additional. She ran for Congress. And she won, taking office January of 2019. WHJX Ponte Vedra Beach, you are listening to Hot 106.5 FM. This is Front Page Jacksonville. I'm Octavius Davis. Welcome to the second hour of Front Page Jacksonville. The unfortunate demise of Jordan Davis gave birth to two powerhouse advocates in his parents, ensuring not only would Jordan's name continue to live on, but also helping to support and fight for other parents who have experienced similar unfortunate incidents of losing children to gun violence. Wow. As I mentioned, Mr. Davis, Ronald Davis, phenomenal gentleman, very down to earth, very approachable, easy to talk to, but man, he loves his son. I haven't had the pleasure of meeting Miss Macbeth yet, but I am certain that her love for Jordan continues to exude in her fight as she continues to support and help other families seeking to overcome the unfortunate incidents that have happened to them. We have our guest who's preparing to come into the studio so we can talk about how we can help you overcome holiday grief. This is Front Page Jacksonville. More in a moment.
Front Page Jacksonville resumes on Hot 106.5.
It's the holiday season. Thanksgiving is a few days away. Families are already determining, what's going to be on the menu. Who's cooking what? Who's bringing what? Who family? Who house we going to? I got the text from my mom the other day. I am on. Let me let you all know something real quick. I have been christened with the duty of bringing the candy yams to Thanksgiving dinner.
Ooh, that's...
Huh? That is a responsibility that cannot be taken lightly, A. But then B, I got some bad news for my family. Because I believe I can make candy yams better than my brother and my mama. Now, my mama listening right now, so I'm going to get a beating at Thanksgiving dinner. I just want y'all to know right now. I'm 46 years old, but I'm not too old to get a whipping from my mama. She will tell me that real quick. But mama, I think I can out-yam you. You taught the kid too well, ma. It's not my fault. You did this. You taught me how to do it. I'm just a great student. So let it be a compliment to you, ma, when you bite into these yams and you realize, oh my God, my son has surpassed me on Mount Yammore. Okay? Stevon, my brother, you don't want to see the kid, okay? I can out-yam you too. My baby sister, Tasha, the yams are yamming. So y'all just be ready. And I will be certain to report back next week on the show to let you know how Thanksgiving dinner went. and I'll also report if my mama put her hands on me. I will let you know. All right. But hey, this is Front Page Jacksonville. I'm Octavius Davis. I am joined in the studio today by licensed marriage and family therapist Khalliah Bryant. Khalliah, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Now, do you and your family celebrate Thanksgiving?
We do. We celebrate all the things. And now that I'm forming my own little family, it looks a lot different this year.
Sure.
But yeah, something we look forward to for the whole year, honestly.
Who is on yam duty?
My mom is actually on yam duty.
Okay.
She takes over all of the custards and the sweet things. So I let her have that.
Yeah.
I let her have that. And I'm working more on my baking skills.
I got you.
I'm trying to channel in my late grandmother with that one. So that's what I'm focusing on this year.
I understand. Well, Khalliah, I'm putting your mama on notice too. She don't want to see my yam. No, I'm kidding. I don't want no smoke. No. No. See, I'm doing all this big boy talk, knowing good and well my family don't trust me to bring no other meal to dinner. Usually, like, yeah, you bring the ice and the plates, Octavius. That's what you can bring. I come from a family of cooks, and that skill didn't necessarily transition to me very well.
Oh my.
So, Khalliah, let's jump into it. Let's first talk about you. Well, where are you from?
I'm from South Georgia, Tifton, Georgia, Valdosta, I-75. Yeah, that's where I'm from.
Oh, so yeah, your mama can throw down. Yeah. Your mom from that way too?
Yes.
Yeah, no.
The sticks.
I don't want no smoke, Miss Ma'am. No, thank you. No. I'm sure she can put in some work in the kitchen.
Yes.
I don't want to see none of that smoke at all. But here it is. You're from South Georgia. You now reside here in Jacksonville. A licensed therapist.
Yes.
What got you into the field of mental health?
Ironically, my family.
Okay. Well, family will do that to you.
I think growing up, I've always been an inquisitive child.
Okay.
And I grew up finding adults would come to me, or I would find myself in spaces with adults talking about their business. And, typically it's children are seen, not heard. It was kind of the opposite for me. I would talk to my elders, and they would talk to me. They would pour into me. And it wasn't until I became an adult where I realized, I'm really good at meeting people where they are and listening to people and empathizing and just really understanding people in general. And I've always wondered why people acted the way they did. Particularly in my family, and I feel like every family, especially Black families, come from a long line of like secrecy and untold stories and drama and things like that happening with every family, really. And I just always wondered why do people act the way they do. And so I went to school for it.
Yeah.
And
where'd you go to school?
I went to Valdosta State University.
Okay.
That's in Valdosta, Georgia. I matriculated all of my years there, undergrad psychology and marriage and family therapy.
So as a kid, adults were coming to you and like,
I know that sounds so strange. I know it sounds strange. But if you can imagine an auntie coming to you, or you find yourself in a room with an auntie who's crying, and you're a kid, you're just like, okay, what do we do?
Yeah.
And I know that now I was put in a more adult-like position, which is not healthy.
Sure.
I was parentified a little bit in that area. But I did find myself in spaces where, people were hurting, and I was just a little girl to put my hand on your hand and just sit with you and tell you, it's okay, auntie, or it's okay, cousin, we'll be okay. Or just people just venting.
Sure. And I'm glad you mentioned that. As you look back on it, you realize that you were, parentified a bit. Because I was going to ask, as a kid, and I don't know how old you were when this was happening, but what type of impact did that have on you emotionally, having to essentially be an emotional sounding board for adults?
It's quite a burden. it's quite heavy to be called into that space as a child. When you're a kid, you the only worry you have is, am I gonna catch my favorite cartoon show on Saturday mornings, you know? But I found myself in more personal spaces that adults should be trying to figure things out in. And over time, that turned into things like people pleasing, that turned into me pouring more than I actually had. But I didn't know any different until I went to school and I started learning all this stuff. And I'm like, oop, I do this. This is not good.
Right.
Maybe I shouldn't be doing this. And that's where my own healing started to take place as well. And I realized it's not just me going through things like this. This is a lot of other people that are experiencing this. We just don't have names for them.
So in the classroom setting, you're sitting through lecture and, all of a sudden you're essentially seeing yourself on these pages, whether symptomatically or what have you, from your own childhood experience. You mentioned that that's where your healing began.
Yes.
Now, for yourself, did you go to seek the help of a licensed professional, or was it just more so self-healing through the educational process?
Mainly self-healing through the educational process. I did go through a time period in my early teenage years of becoming a foster child, just some family issues that required the state to step in. And ironically enough, I asked my social worker at the time, like, is there somebody I can talk to? Like, I want to talk to somebody about what I'm feeling. I'm feeling kind of funny.
Yeah.
I don't feel like myself. I vividly remember telling my social worker these things, and they didn't really respond well or respond appropriately to those requests. And I realize now it's because of the lack of resources available, or that process went by so fast. It's almost not enough time to address those things. So my healing journey didn't really start until I became an adult myself, and I started having children on my own. So I was just like, okay. But I've always sought help. That is one thing that was instilled in me and my family and my mom. She did teach me to be self-sufficient. If you need help, go ask for it, go seek it. So that is one thing I took with me.
Yeah. Very interesting that you shared about temporarily being in foster care. The tail end of last hour, I spoke about National Adoption Day. And, I work in child welfare. That's my daytime job. And just speaking about there being 360-ish kids right here in Duval and Nassau County in foster care who are available for adoption. And if I'm not mistaken, on your website, I think you either currently or previously worked with youth.
I did. That was one of my first jobs. That's the first thing I went into. I just felt compelled. I felt pulled into that. Because that was the most recent experience that I had, and I was just so passionate. I was like, these kids need therapy. Y'all not getting the therapy for them. So yes, I worked alongside a contracted job with DCF, Department of Children and Family Services, and the Department of Juvenile Justice Youth. Yeah.
So here it is. You went on to college. You're seeing yourself essentially on paper. Your textbooks are mirroring for you what your past was like. And then you said once becoming adult is when you really began to lean into your healing. And you decided family therapy and marriage.
Yes.
Why? Why those two areas?
I don't even think I chose it. It came to me.
It chose you?
It came
I understand.
to me. I had a colleague reach out to me, and she was like, I know you were looking for a therapy program. Why don't you check out this program that I'm in? And it's for marriage and family therapy. And I had not heard of that type of program before. I just thought, okay, psychology program, I'll work with children or just do therapy. I just thought I want to do therapy. I didn't know that there were different types of licenses that I can get. And I'm so glad that I went into that program, because Valdosta State has one of the largest student-run clinics in that program for marriage and family therapy. That just means we study in the community. We are actually working with real-life people as we are studying and getting our degree. And so we get hands-on training just right out of the classroom.
Yeah.
And so that marriage and family, I always wanted to work with families because of how
your experience.
Yes, because
up.
of and I was like, wow, there's an actual program for just that. So I was like, no, of course I'm gonna sign up for this program. So it was a no-brainer.
I do a number of different things, but one of the things I speak about in one of the other environments where I teach people how to become voice actors. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I share with my students is you can select a particular genre that you think you would like to work in as a voice actor, but ultimately the genre is going to elect you. And so you selected, psychology as being the field of study, but marriage and family therapy elected you.
I like that's a bar. That's a bar.
I can spit a little something, huh?
I like that.
And so since you've been working in marriage and family therapy, how long have you been in that arena?
Officially, not including school, but I started my private practice in 2020.
Wow.
Yes.
So COVID, hold on now.
Yes.
Was this before or during COVID when you decided to go private?
This was during the thick of COVID. I got laid off from my DCF job. They cut the programs because it was an in-home therapy program. And obviously you couldn't go in homes anymore. And so that was honestly God telling me, all right, hey, the wait is over. You got to start. Yeah, you got to do something. So I went right into it. Everything. I had a full caseload. Everything laid out. I built my website, and it's just like people just came pouring in, and that was just a beautiful blessing.
Now you say you know that it was God pushing you, right? So here's my question: 2020 is when you were forced, to go into private practice. But before 2020, how long were you getting those promptings?
2017. Since 2017, I had my job. So the job, you know how jobs can be comfortable.
Absolutely,
I'm getting my
steady paychecks.
I'm getting my benefits. I don't really want to go by myself.
Got a good job,
So I didn't really have the desire. I wanted to. I thought about it. Because I was like, I make my own rules. But the structure of it, the lack of structure that I perceived at the time, kind of, swayed me away. I wasn't really into doing it on my own. And so at that time, I had just had my baby, 2020, the start of it in April. And so I was newly postpartum. Everything was new, everything. And that's when I decided, okay, I have to really do this now.
Yeah. So here it is, 2020. You're thrust into your own practice with providing therapy or counseling rather for married couples as well as family. So let's take a step back because marriage and family is where you specialize.
Yes.
But let's take a 10,000-foot step back and look at therapy as a whole within the African American community. You mentioned a moment ago about your brief foster care experience and how there were limited resources. What have you seen on your end as it relates to mental health resources for African Americans since you've been in the field?
The resources are there. That my experience has debunk that belief that there are no resources whatsoever. They may seem limited.
Sure.
If you don't know where to look, if you don't know who to talk to. So that's why getting acquainted with your community liaisons and knowing somebody, really. That's where that helps. But there are resources. You just got to know how to look and what to look for.
Yeah.
So just like I am a marriage and family therapist, you can't just get on Google and say, I'm looking for a therapist.
Yeah.
You have to understand what your issue is first and know what it is you need help with. And that is something I'm seeing an increase of lately. More people know what it is that they're coming to therapy for. And that's been refreshing to see too.
833-758-1065 is the number to call if you'd like to join the conversation here on Front Page Jacksonville. I'm joined by Khalliah Bryant. She is a licensed marriage and family therapist right here in Jacksonville. And we're just cracking open the conversation about the state of mental health within the African American community. Now, Khalliah, as you know, going to see a therapist in the African American community has been taboo, or had been taboo for years. I remember at 17 years old, seemingly out of the blue, I began having seizures.
Wow.
I was admitted into the Mayo Clinic Hospital for almost a week, and they're running all these different types of tests on me because I didn't have a history of seizures. And so they finally brought in some neurologists. And, you know, they didn't hook me up to all the machines and everything this go around. For those of you who are familiar with the old Incredible Hulk TV show and how he had all these wires and everything, as a kid, as a 17-year-old, that's how I felt with all this stuff they had on me. Well, they bring these neurologists in and they just had a conversation with me. And when it was all said and done, their diagnosis was, they said, well, what you're experiencing is due to stress, specifically emotional stress. As a younger man, dealt with different types of trauma inside the home. For one reason or another, at 17, those seizures became triggered. They called them pseudo seizures.
Wow.
And they said, we want you to go and talk to a therapist. Now, this is 1995, 1996. So when my mom and I are, you know, together, the doctors leave. I was like, yo, Mom, I ain't crazy. I don't need to go and talk to, you know, XYZ. That's how I interpreted it at the time. Going to see a therapist means that you're crazy. There's something wrong with you. And so I went to maybe 1 or 2 sessions. I remember the gentleman, his name was Dave. And we just had a conversation. You know, it was nothing like what I saw on television. You know, I didn't have to lay down, because when I went out, I was like, do I got to lay on the couch? He said, well, no, you can sit if you like, you know. So let's talk about just the myths associated with going to therapy.
Oh, there's so many. I often laugh about the one about laying on the couch.
Yeah.
The myth of talking to a therapist equates to being crazy. I think media has done a number on us as far as how they've depicted therapy or mental health. Really, all you see in the media is somebody in the psychiatric ward being pent up or on psychotropic meds and just really zoned out. And you might see people sitting on a couch talking to someone, but you don't see people that look like us.
Right.
And for some reason that causes a great disconnect, because when we don't see ourselves in media, then we don't think we just don't associate with that. So that is one of the bigger issues that I'm seeing. And I love how you pointed out that it is becoming less of a taboo, because now we are exposed to so much information.
Yes.
And we're hearing and seeing so many conversations surrounding mental health now, and I love that. I love seeing that. Another, I guess, I don't know, I wouldn't say it's a myth, but I would say it's more of like a statistic or a trend. I don't know what you want to call it, but generations like the boomer generation, they're a little bit more apprehensive about therapy, because they come from a time where it's like, hey, look, whatever you're going through, you need to suck it up and get over it or get through it. God is the way. You need to go to church, pray about it or something. we don't have time to be talking about our feelings.
Yeah.
Get back to work. Let's come on.
I want to come back to that, what you just mentioned. We're about to take a break, but I want to come back to that aspect where you mentioned about go to church and pray about it.
Yes.
I want to come back to that because there is a lot, in my humble opinion, there are a lot of things that we try to pray away that the Most High has put wisdom in individuals right here on earth to help deal with. But we're going to come back to that. 833-758-1065 is the number to call if you would like to join the conversation with myself and Khalliah Bryant, licensed marriage and family therapist here in the city of Jacksonville. You're listening to Front Page Jacksonville. I'm Octavius Davis. We'll see you in a moment.
The heartbeat of the community. Front Page Jacksonville returns on Hot 106.5.
I'm in the studio this morning with Khalliah Bryant. She is a licensed marriage and family therapist. Before the break, Khalliah, you made mention about, within the church community, and just the importance of mental health being administered throughout that environment. And so for me, that's a huge sticking point for several reasons. But the most relevant that I'll share, I currently have a therapist. All right. I am not a unicorn. I am an African-American man, and I have a therapist to help me maintain my mental health. But one of the questions that I asked him when I was vetting whether I would bring him on as my therapist, he makes it known on his website that he's a Christian and provides Christian therapy. Mm-hmm. I wasn't necessarily looking for nor interested in a Christian approach to therapy. My interest was more so he's an African-American man. I wanted to be able to talk with the man with like experience. And so I asked him during the initial intake conversation, do you have the ability to be objective to help me navigate the challenges that I have without force feeding me scripture? And he said, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it has been a very, very fruitful experience for me over the past year and a half, almost 2 years since I've been seeing him. So within the church, right, there was once upon a time where if somebody was dealing with something, either they were struck by the Holy Ghost or they was possessed by a devil. There was no in between, right? But what are you seeing taking place now within faith-based circles as it relates to mental health?
Mental health. Good question. What I'm seeing now is an uptick in pastors, preachers, missionaries really advocating for mental health. There are actual churches now that have the resources laid out to say, hey, we know or we are connected to other Christian-based counselors that you can go talk to.
Yeah.
Because that is essentially what the church was for, like community. You
a
go
hospital,
to
a spiritual hospital.
Yes,
yeah.
You go to church to seek healing. But the more that we're learning about mental health as a science, the more I'm seeing that pastors are respecting that and realizing, oh, this is a health issue. And so we have to be able to provide create a bridge for our congregation to get help. So I am seeing more of that.
So, Khalliah, you're saying that if I go and see a licensed therapist, that does not mean that I lack faith in God's ability to heal me?
It does not. If anything, you are doing what I hope God has put in your heart to go seek for yourself. I was just talking about, two of my favorite quotes in the Bible about, faith without work is dead. That's one of them. If God has shown you that there are some things in your life, your marriage, your children, that you need to work on or get help about, go seek that. Yeah. Go seek that. Go work on that. And the Bible also talks about go out and seek wise counsel.
Yeah.
It's right there. And so what I encourage, people of the faith to do is open your heart about mental health being a health issue.
Yeah.
And if you need to, if you want to, seek someone who has a base in Christian beliefs or whatever religious beliefs that you carry, so that they can see you and understand and really translate it for you.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of scripture that align with mental health and talking about the mind and how to overcome adversities and things like that.
You mentioned seeking wise counsel. And so what I'd like to do for the next few moments is seek your wise counsel as we go into the first round of holiday celebrations this week with Thanksgiving on the horizon. I'm sure you may be aware, I'm definitely aware of loved ones and others who the holiday season isn't the most joyous for them for several reasons.
Yeah.
Grief is usually a word that's associated with this time of year.
Yes.
In your profession, how is grief defined?
Let's see. I don't want to give a bunch of psychobabble. I'll say this. I'll give my definition of how I explain it to clients, because I can give the science version and then, it might not land. But
Sure.
I talk to my clients about grief being a visitor to your home. Something or someone, grief, that visits you impromptu sometimes, by surprise, by sudden, just a sudden take. You look up and there's grief knocking at your door to remind you of the pain and whatever you went through. And what I tell my clients is, don't let grief move in. Grief's going to visit you. Allow it to visit you. Invite it inside. Say, hey, come on, grief. I didn't know you was coming today.
Right.
But sit with grief, but don't allow it to move in and rearrange your furniture.
Yeah.
Find ways to live with grief so that it doesn't take over your life and change who you are and harden your heart. Find ways to grow in grief.
Yeah.
And that's essentially, I feel like everybody knows what grief is. You felt it. It's kind of like love, where it's really hard to define, but you know it when you feel it.
Yeah. So grief is a guest, not a resident.
Not a resident. Sometimes it moves in, but you have to find a way to live with it or find a way to move it out, and have a healthy relationship with grief.
So are grief and depression one and the same, or are those two different experiences?
Depression is a little bit deeper. Depression is a more of a psychological state of the mind, with more telling symptoms that you can identify more of, where if grief comes in and changes your day-to-day life, then it becomes depression.
Okay.
So it starts as grief, and then it grows into depression with all these symptoms, sleeping or sleeplessness, not taking care of yourself like you used to, just an overall negative outlook on life. It's hindering your performance at work, in the home, with your children, with your spouse. There are definitely signs that tell, okay, I might be depressed. I'm not just a little sad anymore. I'm going through something a little bit more deeper.
So with grief, you said, let grief come in. Let grief be a guest. Why is it beneficial for a person to invite grief in when it's knocking at the door? Because
grief is an emotion that you feel. And anytime you try to repress an emotion or keep an emotion out, it doesn't really go anywhere. If anything, it grows and gets bigger, and it needs your attention. So that's why I encourage clients to let it in, so that you can process what it is that it's trying to teach you, what it is that it's trying to point out to you. And that's essentially what those other emotions do.
Yeah.
When you become sad or jealous or angry, that is a sign or a signal that says, I need to work on something. I need to work on my patience. I need to work on how to handle this problem. And that's why we have those emotions. But when you shut it out and you deny it, that it pours on to other people. It pours onto your relationships. It impacts your work. And other people notice it and they have to deal with it. But if you're not dealing with it, then where does it go?
Yeah. And so that's a very interesting concept. You know, I'll be honest, and part of the reason of what's led me to therapy is because the incident that I had at 17 when I began having the seizures, and it was determined that it was due to emotional stress.
Yes.
What happened for me is I stopped trusting my emotions. And I actually shut down emotionally to the point where I wouldn't allow myself to feel, consciously at least. I wouldn't allow myself to feel certain things because I didn't want my emotions to sabotage me and I have an episode. But much like you mentioned, years of me shutting down emotionally and shutting down emotionally and shutting down emotionally caused problems once I got married and have kids. And now my wife is like, why does it seem like you don't care? Nothing bothers you. Well, it's because I've
practiced it all these years.
Yeah, I'm so disconnected from it. So when you say invite grief in, you know, not necessarily live with grief, but during that season, allow yourself to feel what it is that grief is pointing out to you. How can one coexist with grief during that season in a healthy way?
And this is the part where you have to speak with a therapist so that they can explain it a little bit deeper to your particular situation. Because it sounds counterintuitive to allow grief to come in and you sit with it. What do you mean? I don't want to feel this.
Right.
But it's more so to say, honor it, acknowledge it, and allow it to pass. Allowing it to pass looks like lighting a candle, going to visit the gravesite, writing in your journal, reflecting, calling a loved one so you can share that experience or that memory about the grief or what caused the grief. And that is how you process emotions. When you talk it through, when you are in shared spaces, because when you don't talk about it, it doesn't go anywhere, and it has to go somewhere. And that's why we're seeing more heart disease. That's why we're seeing all of these diseases, physical health in the Black community, particularly. And that's stress. That is essentially stress with nowhere to go. Yes.
That was so paradigm shifting for me at 17 to learn that stress was not only causing my body to respond the way that it was responding, but I recall the doctors also saying to me that stress is one of the major killers.
Yes.
Like across the board. And as a 17-year-old, you know, prior to the experience, you think yourself to be immortal. Well, you're right. It's like, oh, you know, I'm good. I'm going to live forever. But I was faced with my own mortality at 17 years old. And so leaning into the emotions, allowing yourself to feel those things now, and doing that when everybody's singing joy to the world and let's have turkey and Thanksgiving and rah rah sis boom blah blah. Oh, I don't feel very holiday-ish right now because the loved ones that I'm used to spending this time with during this time of year, they're no longer here.
Yes. And
so I like some of the tips that you shared with lighting a candle, writing in a journal to remember, going to visit the gravesite. For family members who may have a loved one who's experiencing this season of grief, how can family be supportive of that person?
Reaching out, reconnecting. Sergeant General just put out a new statistic that a new number one killer for people of the United States is loneliness. We're in an epidemic of loneliness. And I guess 20, 30 years ago, when you would say, oh yeah, 30 years from now we're gonna have an epidemic and we're gonna call it loneliness. You'd be like, what?
Yeah.
How? And we cannot thrive in isolation. As human, we cannot thrive in isolation. We cannot heal in isolation. We are born to relation. We have to be in communion with people in order to thrive. That's why we see in other communities, like the Asian community, they thrive because they understand, like especially in the Latino community, they understand the power of coming together and having family structure. So that is my number one, is to come together. I know it sounds so cliche, but you can start with a friend. You can start with calling someone on the phone and just checking up on them.
Sure.
Hey, how you doing? Are you good? I know this is, you probably don't even have to bring it up, but to let someone know that you are there.
Yeah. Wow. That's simple but powerful, right? Simple but powerful tip. 833-758-1065. We have a few minutes left on the show if you'd like to jump in on the conversation. I'm joined by Khalliah Bryant, licensed marriage and family therapist right here in Jacksonville, just speaking on different ways to help a loved one through their season of grief that they may be experiencing during this time of year. So, Khalliah, for yourself, you have your own private practice.
I do.
Right. And we discussed already how we're tearing down the walls of misnomer with African Americans going to therapy. It no longer has to be taboo. It does not mean that you are crazy. Right. Even in the church, you're seeing an uptick of pastors who are supporting the mental health sciences. So if someone who may be interested in finding out more about your services, maybe they've said, you know what, I've been kind of feeling like I need to talk to somebody, but I haven't known where to go. And of course, earlier in the show, you already shunned, don't go to Google, although I found my therapist on Google.
To Google. You can still go to Google.
So how can our listeners get in contact with you if they'd like to have a more intimate conversation about their situation?
Yes. I love having these conversations, and I thank you once again for having me on the show. My private practice is named More Life Wellness, LLC. And once again, I am right here in Jacksonville, but I serve all of Florida. If you go to my website, I have a plethora of resources. I've created my website to where if you can't get in touch with me, you're going to get in touch with somebody, because I've been able to build a network of other therapists like myself that you can get in contact with. And so just go to that website. It's www.morelifewellnessllc.com. You can Google Black therapists in Jacksonville, and I probably will pop up in the first page. There are other websites like Therapy for Black Girls, Therapy for Black Men, .com.
I didn't know that was a website, because I literally went to Google and I typed in African American male therapist, and that's how I found mine.
Yes.
And I told my wife, I'm like, I don't even know where to begin to find an African American therapist. So I love. So what were those two sites you mentioned again for the ladies and for the men?
Therapyforblackgirls.com and Therapy for Black Men. I am on therapyforblackgirls.com. And you can find other women. It's like a Google platform in and of itself. You can filter out what type of therapist you're looking for based on your insurance. If you don't know where to start, a good place to start is your insurance. A lot of people do work and have insurance plans. So go call your insurance companies and see who is covered under your insurance. So that is a really good first step in finding a good therapist.
And one last question before we head out. You already mentioned that your mama is throwing down for Thanksgiving, right? In this social media age where there are so many influencers giving relationship advice, I probably should have started our conversation with this, right? But what is it that you would like to speak on very briefly as it relates to relationships and some of the misnomers? Because again, a lot of so-called self-proclaimed social media therapists, relationship gurus are saying your relationship should look like this, it should look like that. How would you cut through all that noise for someone who's looking for genuine advice and information about relationships?
Well, one thing I've learned is that you will probably learn more about yourself in a relationship. That is one thing I have seen, tried and true. And in that, it is really important that whether you're in a relationship or not, really tap in with your core values.
Yeah.
Really tap in with what means the most to you. And do you have a guideline for your life? I actually have a book. This is a shameless plug.
Go ahead. Go for it. You got time. Go for it.
I have a book, a workbook called Core Values. And I help my clients and help the reader define and verbalize what their core values are. Without core values, you can't be in a healthy relationship. It's going to be, you can be in a relationship with this notebook on the table, but it is more of a direction in your relationship when you are when both of you and your spouse or partner are tapped into your core values and y'all understand, this is my core value, this is yours, does it align? No, then maybe we shouldn't be in this relationship.
Yeah.
Because what I'm seeing now are people are going head to head on, no, my core value is more important. No, mine is more important. When y'all probably not compatible at all.
Yeah.
So that, to me, that cuts through all of the hoopla of relationships. Every time I'm hearing someone talk about a bad relationship or how a relationship is supposed to be, my first thought is, well, are they aligned in their core values? If not, what are we talking about?
Khalliah Bryant is her name. You can go to morelifewellnessllc.com to get in contact with her to find out more. Khalliah, thank you so much for hanging out with us today on Front Page Jacksonville. Thank you for listening as well. Happy Thanksgiving to you and yours. Health Beat with Wanda P is coming up next. I'll catch you next week. Be blessed. Peace.
Front Page Jacksonville, Sundays from 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. For show episodes, go to hot1065fm.com. We are Hot 1065.